Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Elie Buechler, and I serve as the Assistant Rabbi at the Jewish Center here on the Upper West Side. We're pleased to be hosting a candidate forum for Manhattan District Attorney. I want to begin by thanking our co-sponsors for tonight's forum: B'nai Jeshurun, Chabad of the West Side, Congregation Shereth Israel, Manhattan Jewish Experience, Lincoln Square Synagogue, Ohab Tzedek, and West Side Institutional Synagogue. The District Attorney of Manhattan oversees the prosecution of violations of New York State and local laws in Manhattan. Importantly as well, the DA's office decides which cases to prosecute and which cases not to prosecute. The next DA will manage thousands of employees, hundreds of lawyers, and has the power to shape the culture of the justice system here in Manhattan. We're honored to be hosting the two candidates for Manhattan District Attorney this evening. Joining us first is Thomas Caniff, the Republican candidate for District Attorney. And then at 8:30, we'll have the opportunity to hear from Alvin Bragg, the Democratic candidate for Manhattan District Attorney. Tonight, we hope to learn from our candidates as to what their vision is for Manhattan District Attorney. We hope this evening will be informative and educational in helping individuals in our broader Jewish community make an informed decision in this upcoming election. As a reminder, the Jewish Center is a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we therefore will not endorse any candidate for District Attorney. I'd also like to mention that closed captioning is available at tonight's event. Just click on the bottom of your screen. You're also welcome to use the chat function to chat at me or at Aaron Strum if you have any other questions that you'd like us to address this evening. So we'll open up the evening with Thomas Caniff's opening statements, followed by a Q&A with many of the questions gathered from all of you who registered for this program. And a few minutes before 8:30, I'll ask Mr. Caniff to deliver his closing remarks, and then we'll invite Mr. Bragg to address us. Mr. Caniff, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you are running for Manhattan District Attorney?
Absolutely. Good evening. I would like to begin by first thanking the Jewish Center as well as the co-sponsors for hosting this event. I also want to thank you, Rabbi Buechler, for moderating, and of course my opponent, Alvin Bragg, for participating with me tonight in what I believe is one of the most important dialogues of this election season. My name is Thomas Caniff, and as you know, I'm running to be Manhattan's next district attorney. Well, I've never liked talking much about myself, but it's important you know a bit about me and why I'm running. I'm a lifelong New Yorker, a husband, and a father of 4 wonderful daughters. Professionally, I began my career at a large corporate law firm. It was a great experience, but I knew what I really wanted to do was serve the public and try cases in court. So I applied and was eventually hired as an assistant district attorney. During my time as an assistant DA, I also commissioned into the Army JAG Corps, serving with the storied Harlem Hellfighters. I was deployed to Iraq as a young lieutenant, serving as a chief legal assistance officer, managing the legal services for tens of thousands of military personnel and civilians. Upon my return from combat, myself and fellow veterans started to practice with the little money we saved during deployment, and over the years grew it into one of the region's most respected criminal law firms. Most people who have done it will tell you that starting a small business is the hardest thing they've ever done, and a law firm is no exception. In addition to trying cases, I've trained many young lawyers who have come to work for me, and at times done everything else, from managing payroll to emptying waste paper baskets. I continue to serve as a major in the New York Army National Guard. When COVID hit New York in March of last year and most New Yorkers were ordered to stay home, I once again answered the call to active duty, running into the fight to flatten the curve, not away from it, serving as the chief legal officer at the Javits Center, both when it was a hospital and throughout this year when we repurposed it as the nation's premier vaccination site. My decision to run for Manhattan District Attorney was not born out of any sense of political ambition or personal ambition, but rather out of a love for this city and a deep dismay at what I see happening to it. New York City stands at a precipice. Violent crimes have increased at a startling rate. Shootings in the city doubled last year, and murders were up nearly 50%. And the accompanying decline in quality of life in the city has become apparent to most New Yorkers. In the last several months that I've spent campaigning all over Manhattan, it's obvious that too many of us don't feel safe. What is most troubling is that the violence on our streets has disproportionately impacted some of our most vulnerable New Yorkers, whether it be young people of color, who we know are much more likely to fall victim to gun violence, the Chinese mother who was pushed to her death in front of her son on the subway earlier this year, or the members of our Jewish community that have seen synagogues desecrated in multi-week hate sprees, and our community members beaten on the street for having the audacity to wear a yarmulke in public. While some of my opponent's supporters have dismissed efforts to call attention to these atrocities as fear-mongering, it is difficult to characterize such a profound increase in violence as anything other than what it is, a crisis. What is equally troubling is that so much of the chaos we are seeing has been both initiated and compounded by misguided reforms that my opponent continues to embrace and has in fact promised to expand. These include the recent bail reform laws, the disbanding of the NYPD plainclothes units, whose main objectives were policing guns and subway crime, and the insistence on ignoring lower level offenses such as shoplifting that, if left unchecked, encourage more serious crimes while contributing to an underlying decay in our quality of life. The good news is that New York has turned it around before, and we will do so again. To be successful, however, we need to put common sense policies ahead of new age ideology. Rather than marginalizing police and fueling the mistrust that exists within underserved communities, we need to support the institution of policing while holding those officers that violate their oaths accountable. In my career as both a prosecutor and a defense attorney, I've done just that. Rather than having a district attorney whose policies embolden would-be criminals, we need one that believes in the principles of deterrence and accountability and will serve them without abandoning fairness. Finally, we need a district attorney who also believes in the power of human redemption, who can distinguish between those who act violently or with the malicious intent to place themselves above that of society, and those deserving of the gentler hand of the criminal justice system, which I have personally used to guide defendants towards the services they need to handle issues like mental illness and dependency and improve their lives. It won't be easy, but if we work together and put common sense first, we will get the city back on track, and together we will save lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kniff. I want to also thank you for your service to our country and for working at the Javits Center, where I received 2 of my shots. So thank you very much.
It's been a privilege.
If elected to Manhattan DA, you'd be the first Republican to hold this position since 1941, when Thomas Dewey held the position. Democrats outnumber Republicans 8-1 in Manhattan. Why do you think New Yorkers will vote Kniff?
Well, I hope they'll vote for me because they'll look at actually what I stand for and agree that I'm really the moderate candidate in this race and the common sense candidate. I mean, look, I've spent the last 5-6 months basically beating the streets every day. I can tell you that when you run for political office in New York City, as I've learned the hard way, and you don't have the support of something like the apparatus of the Democratic machine behind you, you have no choice but to put boots on the ground and get out there and try to reach as many people as you can. And that's what I've done. I've been to every area in the city, some of the more traditionally Democratic areas like the Upper West Side and Harlem, where truly I've been received the best. Look, are there people in this city or in any other place that hear, he's running on a local Republican ticket that are just never going to entertain my candidacy? Absolutely. I mean, they're there. That's their right, by the way. But they are far the exception. Most people, I believe, and it's only been confirmed in my time on the campaign trail, moderate towards the middle. And in a local race with a candidate who's really is not receiving any support from the National Republican Party, no real tangible support from the state Republican Party, some good faith support from the local GOP, which unfortunately is nowhere near as robust as the Democratic Party. I think most people are really looking are willing to vote the issues, not the party, vote the candidate, not the party. And I think that my ideology, my platform, if you will, on how to address the criminal issues is much more in line with the vast majority, Democrat, Republican, Independent, of people living in New York City and living in Manhattan.
Great, thank you. As you mentioned, crime is up in New York City. At staggering rates, murders, robbery, and across the board in many areas. So, what, as Manhattan DA, would you do specifically to combat the surge in crime in Manhattan?
Well, so a few things. And first of all, as I pointed out before, we have to rebuild the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. They're suffering from the greatest attrition that I think they've ever experienced. As somebody who practices in that courthouse virtually every day, it's very difficult to keep a DAI case because so many people are leaving. So we need to rebuild morale. We need to look at, if I'm elected, we're going to look at the personnel we have, and the personnel we're going to bring in are going to be the best and brightest. And we're going to let them know that, look, they have the support of the leadership of their office in doing their job. Second thing I think we need to address very swiftly is technology within the office. One of the consequences of the criminal justice reforms is that prosecutors are being overwhelmed with discovery. Now, it's not that I don't support discovery reforms. In fact, when I was an assistant district attorney, we practiced what was known as open file discovery. We actually had the defense attorney come to your office, you put them in a conference room, and you basically turn the entire file over to them, redacting the personally identifying information and so forth. So I've said for my entire career, if there's ever a case where you need to have complete discovery and transparency, it's in a criminal case. But the problem is when the legislature passed the criminal justice reforms and included these aggressive discovery reforms, they included unrealistic timelines, and they failed to fund the mandate. So a lot of the assistant DAs that are leaving the offices, they're saying, look, we basically become paralegals for the defense bar. We can't really do our job because all our time is spent turning over discovery. So we got to make sure that the technology, we need some help from the legislature, but in the interim, we have to make sure the technology in the office is the best there can be to assist the DAs in complying with the discovery demands. And secondly, I want to really reinvest and emphasize in our diversionary courts, because it's not that I want to take misdemeanors and prosecute them to the fullest extent of law and put people in jail and convict them on lower level offenses. What I don't want to do is ignore those offenses, which is, by the way, what my opponent Alvin Bragg has suggested. But I want to use the intersection of the criminal justice system, the guiding hand of the criminal justice system, to intervene, to try to get people the help they need, whether it's mental health, drugs, what have you. And the criminal justice system can be used in that way through our diversionary courts. It can also reduce the discovery burden on our prosecutors, so they're not drowning in discovery on misdemeanor cases. You divert the defendant, and you say, look, a condition of the diverting your case is you might ultimately wind up with a non-prosecution agreement or an ACD or what have you. But you're not going to put these demands on us to get you to discovery in 15 or 30 days either. If that's the route you want to go, then we're going to have to litigate the case, and that also is their absolute right. But I think setting forth that dichotomy can help the office, one, help people charged with lower level offenses, two, focus on the bigger cases, the more serious cases, and then hopefully in that process, we'll convince the legislature to help us either extend the guidelines on discovery or give us the funding that they should have done originally when they passed this law.
Great. We're going to pick up on a couple of the themes that you've mentioned. I want to start with legislation and law. Because the bail reform law that was passed in January 2020, that went into effect in January of 2020, has been widely criticized. Even people on both sides of the aisle have very much criticized it. And so, as the DA, even though you don't make law, you have a great influence over the way that legislation could change over the next number of years. So, what would you advocate for in reforming the bail law in New York?
Well, and I think you said it perfectly, Rabbi. I mean, we don't make legislation, but certainly the New York County District Attorney's Office, the Manhattan DA's office is among the most powerful state prosecutors' offices in the country, if not the most powerful. If I get elected here, particularly running as a Republican in a traditionally Democratic district, I think that's going to send a message. And as you've also pointed out, there's already been calls on the Democrats in the state legislature to change this law. In fact, when the law was proposed, there was many Democrats who were opposing it as written. What they had said was, look, if we're going to do this, you have to at least give judges the discretion to set bail on demonstrably dangerous individuals. This is how it exists in the vast majority of cases in the United States, by the way. But unfortunately, a group of outside the mainstream advocates, represented by, in large part, by the political wing of the Legal Aid Society. I'm not knocking the Legal Aid Society or public defenders, by the way. Public defenders do some of the hardest work in the criminal justice system. And I could tell you, as somebody who's practiced criminal defense for 15 years, they deal with some of the most difficult, picayune issues. And it was not uncommon for me to pick up the phone when I had an arcane parole issue, what have you, call one of my friends in the public defender's office and legal aid office, say, look, I need some help here. But the reality is the political lobby of the Legal Aid Society is very extreme. And they lobbied against including the public safety exception in the bail law. And I would be remiss not to point out that my opponent, Alvin Bragg, who we'll hear from later, sits on the board of the political board of the board of directors of the Legal Aid Society, and has been very vocal, was very vocal in opposing the public safety exception. Not only supports the current bail reform law, but he has actually called to eliminate cash bail completely, which would really double down on what has already proven to be a disastrous policy.
Yeah, speaking about cash bail, many have argued that cash bail, especially on lower level crimes, is essentially a poor tax, right? It seems to, tell people that their freedom can only be granted if they have the means to be free. So what would you respond to such claims?
Well, a couple of points. Look, I have seen in my 15 plus years advocating for the rights of the accused, many indigent, by the way, because I'm a member of the indigent defense panel here in New York City. So, not all my clients are hiring, retained lawyers like myself. I have seen abuses of the bail system. There's no question about that. There's judges that have abused it. There's prosecutors that have abused it in what they've asked for. And as a result, I spent a lot of my career advocating against excessive bail applications. But the answer is not to eliminate cash bail completely. The answer is to make sure that the cases you're requesting bail in are appropriate cases to request bail in, and the amounts requested are appropriate. And that is one of the, I think, the good things that we did in the criminal justice reforms. Even though I disagree with most of the bail reform, we included something, a revision of the statute that said that a judge should consider the defendant's ability to pay in determining the correct amount of bail. That didn't exist before. There's another point I want to make about bail. A lot of the progressive, the far progressive crowd, portrays it as a zero-sum game, that you can pay set bail and you're looking to keep someone in jail. Even for someone who posts bail, and many people do post bail, even people of lesser income means, the bail itself acts as a deterrent in many cases, because even if they're not sitting in Rikers, but they're forced to post some bail, they don't want to lose the bail that they posted, or that their wife or husband has posted on their behalf, or their mother or loved ones. So it is an ability, it's certainly not the only means, but it is one additional layer of deterring people from reoffending, whereas if they're just let out because the judge has to let them out, because the judge has no discretion. And there's really then no consequence to getting arrested and getting rearrested again. And that's something that we've seen throughout the last 20 months that the bail reform has been in effect. It's in virtually every newspaper or media source that we pick up, people getting arrested, reoffending, getting arrested again. I've seen it in my own practice. I'm happy to represent indigents. It doesn't mean I want an eternal client. And a lot of people that I've represented through the indigent panel, I can't get rid of them as clients because they're let out on a burglary, they commit another burglary. They're let out on that burglary, they commit a domestic violence offense, and I can't get off the case. That is not doing justice to our criminal justice system. It's not serving the needs of our society. We have to balance fairness, but we can't turn our back to protecting the innocent.
Thank you. You mentioned Rikers Island in your answer, and I want to know your thoughts. The conditions at Rikers Island are deteriorating, with 13 inmates dying in the past year, one just this weekend. So, the current Manhattan DA, Cy Vance, has noted and directed prosecutors not to ask for bail in nonviolent cases in order to have fewer people sent to Rikers Island, even, he claims, if it risks an increase in lower level crimes in Manhattan. Would you continue that policy of Cy Vance? And what are your thoughts on sending people to Rikers Island?
No, I absolutely would not continue that policy. I mean, I will say that, look, I think bail should not be the first resort. I think it should be one of the last resorts, but it needs to be available and requested and set where appropriate. And the reality is that particularly now, when we've essentially let half the people that were in Rikers Island as recently as a few years ago out, Rikers Island is populated with overwhelmingly dangerous individuals, meaning people that are there for dangerous offenses, that have criminal histories, or if they're there for nonviolent offenses, usually because they have very pronounced criminal histories. So look, I'm not happy about what I hear going on at Rikers Island. I was at Rikers Island 2 weeks ago, not for a photo op, but to visit a client. Short of the people that work there and the inmates there, there's very few people that have been to Rikers Island more than I have through the last couple of decades. I tell everyone to listen and say, look, if we want to tear down the buildings at Rikers Island and commission Frank Gehry to build, architectural marble towers with natural light, yoga studios, wherever else, I'm all for it. I have no dog in that hunt. I mean, I'll point out, if you make it a little too nice, people may not want to not go there anymore. But I am all for, first of all, rehabilitation within prisons. I've seen it work, by the way. Rehabilitation through the criminal justice system, as I pointed out before. And I'm not only for, but I agree we must. It is a constitutional requirement that our prisoners, regardless of the crime they've committed, be held in humane situations. That's why, whatever our new mayor decides to do, as far as whether it's rebuilding Rikers or spreading the jails over the community, that's fine, as long as we're assured that the people that need to be incarcerated pending trial, and by the way, Rikers also incarcerates people that have been convicted serving their sentences if it's less than a year, or have a facility to be confined in if that's needed. I'd like to see the jail population go down as much as possible. I'd like to see no one in jail. We don't live in a utopian society, and we should work towards that goal, but it can't come at the expense of public safety.
Shoplifting has been a major concern of many residents of Manhattan, especially on the Upper West Side, with Duane Reade, CVS stores being stolen from daily and often by repeat offenders. What is your plan to essentially combat shoplifting in Manhattan?
Well, the plan is we should go back to doing what we were doing before the progressive notion that, they call it progressive. I don't think it's very progressive. I think it's regressive to say that we're going to unwind, thousands of years of Judeo-Christian ethics and say that all of a sudden there's no consequence to stealing another person's property. Now, what that consequence should be, so it should certainly be measured. I don't think we should be sending first, second time petty larcenists to Rikers Island. The truth is we never did that. That's a myth. But the notion that you're just going to ignore or give people license to steal up to $1,000 of goods, as we've seen in some of the other cities that have been taken over by these extreme progressive DAs, or as my opponent Alvin Bragg has suggested, people should be permitted, or we should turn a blind eye to them stealing up to $250, is a horrible policy. Traditionally, if you were charged with shoplifting in Manhattan, you were arrested or received a desk appearance ticket, which I think is appropriate. And if it was a first-time offense, usually you got a couple of days community service. We had a great program called the Shoplift program, where you maybe go through a class or two, and at the end of 6 months, the case would be dismissed and sealed. So again, by going after the lower-level offenses, we're not ruining people's lives, but we're showing that there's conduct that as a society we will not tolerate. And perhaps we're bettering some lives, and that's far better than ignoring it. So we need to go back to doing that. I knew when the current DA's office said that they were going to stop prosecuting these offenses or de-prosecuting them, because you hardly see anybody charged with shoplifting anymore, what the consequence would be. And anybody who lives in Manhattan has seen it. You go into Duane Reade, you go to CVS, as you mentioned, everything's locked up. I've actually talked with some of the store employees, not as a politician. They don't even know who I am. I just go in and speak with them. I said, how's this affecting things? In fact, before this interview, I went in and went to the CVS and bought a razor, and I had to get it unlocked. And they said, it's devastating. Business sales are down. Customers are getting frustrated and walk out. And who does it really hurt? Think when you go to a CVS in Duane Reade or any of those places in Manhattan, there's so many employees of color in those stores. So many people that rely on them for employment. Underserved areas traditionally have had difficulty attracting national retailers? What sort of environment are we going to create for those areas now when you say, look, if you decide to do business in New York City, understand that, various people can come into your store numerous times a day and help themselves to $250 worth of goods, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's a terrible message to say, and it's going to have a terrible impact on our city. The parts of our city most likely that need those sort of retailers and jobs the most.
Got it. Thank you. We're getting close to the end of our time together. I wanted to just briefly ask you, if you're elected to Manhattan DA, you will likely inherit the charges against the Trump organization, which may even include an indictment against President Trump. How would you handle that high-profile case?
And the answer is I would handle it the same way I would any other case. It's funny. I normally get that question on media or forums like this, and that's fine. I understand why it's asked. I rarely get it on the street. I'm not saying I haven't gotten it, but I rarely get it. But usually when I get that question, I'm standing in front of a grocery store, either by myself or with one volunteer, and I'm handing out my own literature, my own palm cards. And my response to the person asking is usually, well, sir or ma'am, if I had any connection to the former president or his family, or was supported in any way by him, or was looking to do him any favors, do you think I'd be standing out here at 7 o'clock at night handing out my own literature? And usually the person laughs, Democrat, Republican, and they have a chuckle. But it's very, very true. I have nothing to do with Donald Trump or his family. I will be, or if Mr. Bragg is successful, either of us will be inheriting tens of thousands of cases. I would never, I may disagree with Alvin on many of the issues, but I certainly don't undermine his integrity, and I don't think he would undermine mine. I would never suggest that because he might be, from what I understand reading the media, inheriting a case involving Andrew Cuomo or an investigation into Andrew Cuomo, that he would somehow do a favor for Andrew Cuomo because they're of the same political party. That's ridiculous. I am running on the Republican ticket. I make no apologies for it, but the reality is I'm a local lawyer. I think quite an experienced one, particularly in this system. And I'm running because I want to make the city better, not to give political courtesies to strangers.
Great. All right. So we're running out of time here. So if you could just give us in about 60 seconds or so, your closing remarks, and then we'll turn things over to Mr. Bragg in just a moment.
Sure. Thank you, Rabbi. I would conclude by emphasizing that the issues in this district attorney's race are not Republican issues. They're not Democratic issues. They're not even independent issues. They're universal issues that affect all of us. They're about who we are as a people collectively. I am someone who's never been politically active. I've accepted this nomination because I'm disheartened and dismayed at the unnecessary destruction of life on our city streets, destruction that strikes disproportionately at the heart of our underserved communities. As someone who spent the majority of his career defending the rights of the accused, I understand fairness as well as anyone. The reality is that my platform would be one that a moderate Democrat, such as Robert Morgenthau, would have run on at any earlier time. In fact, if you consider some of the truly innovative ideas I've proposed to deal with mental health and addiction, like we touched on, some might even call it liberal. I believe that fairness and redemption should be foundations of any criminal justice system, but they simply cannot come at the expense of public safety. The common sense platform I have proposed stands in sharp contrast to that of my opponents. His policies, while perhaps well-intentioned, have been tried in cities throughout this country, from San Francisco to Chicago to Philadelphia, with consistently disastrous results. While our criminal justice system must be willing to mete out mercy when appropriate, we must also be cognizant of our obligation to protect the innocent from unnecessary harm. In that regard, I'm reminded of the ancient Jewish proverb, which states that to be lenient when you should be firm is to be cruel when you could be kind. Or, put another way, those that are too kind to the cruel wind up being cruel to the kind. Thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Caniff. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Best of luck.
It's been a privilege. Thank you.
Alrighty, at this time, I'd like to introduce Alvin Bragg, who's running for District Attorney of Manhattan on the Democratic ticket. As he's already welcome, Mr. Bragg.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. It's wonderful to have you with us. I'll turn it over to you to, tell us a little bit about yourself with some opening remarks and why you're running for Manhattan DA.
Sure. Thank you so much. And thanks to all for joining us. So I'm a lifelong Manhattanite, schooled on the Upper West Side and raised in Harlem. And my career in public service and law enforcement dates back to when I was growing up during the height of the crack cocaine epidemic in the 80s. Before I turned 21 years old, I had a gun pointed at me 6 times. 3 by the police during lawless stops, and 3 by people who were not police officers during traditional public safety issues. These early experiences are why I went to law school and why I've been working for the past 20 plus years to marry public safety and fairness. I went to law school really to answer the fundamental question. I was stopped 3 times by the police at gunpoint and countless other times, but yet was not safe in my own community, thus the other gun incidents. And so for the past 20 plus years, I've been working to address both fairness and safety. I started out as a civil rights lawyer and a criminal defense lawyer. Then I became a federal prosecutor focused on everything from armed robbery to public corruption. And then I went to the New York State Attorney General's office. I had a number of roles, ultimately serving as the #2 lawyer overseeing an office of more than 1,500, working on complex gun and drug matters, also doing the successful case against the Trump Foundation, and all types of matters, overseeing the entire office. And along the way, I've done both fairness and public safety cases. So, doing cases that hold police accountable. As a federal prosecutor, I prosecuted an FBI agent for lying, but also doing cases that directly affect our public safety. So as a federal prosecutor, prosecuting the owner of a $30 million business who used that business to launder millions and millions of dollars for a violent criminal organization. We turned off the money flow to that organization, and we saw enduring public safety results on our streets. So that's what I've been doing the last 20 plus years. I bring that personal and professional experience to this candidacy, my first time. I've never run for office before. And it gives me a vision for the DA's office that would really focus on the kinds of things that I focused on throughout my career and challenges in my personal life. The top of the list for me is guns. I had a shooting on my block about 10 days ago. I think many of you are familiar with the shooting on 89th Street in Amsterdam, where it's just a couple of blocks before my kids go to school. So this is not just things that happened to me in my youth. These are things that are happening right now today. As a federal prosecutor, I did gun cases. As the #2 in the New York State Attorney General's office, we looked at every single gun found at a crime scene in the state of New York and traced it back to its last lawful sale for a federally licensed firearms dealer. That data is illuminating. It's a literal blueprint for the kind of cases we should be doing, tracking the guns and stopping them from flooding into our communities. Also, we're focused on sexual assaults. Again, something I've worked on during my career. Sexual assaults are the most underreported violent crime in America. And right now, I know from talking to a number of survivors, we have a problem with reporting in Manhattan based upon under-enforcement. I want to address that, which is really a management challenge. And I've overseen an entire office of more than 1,500. And then hate crimes. We've seen a rash of hate crimes directed most recently at the Asian American community, right before the pandemic at the Jewish community. And I've worked on this issue throughout my career as well. When I was at the Attorney General's office, we looked at the rise that happened shortly after former President Trump was elected throughout our state. And we supported law enforcement throughout the state with our resources and with our guidance on how to address hate crimes. And more recently, I've been actively engaged, really trying to educate others in law enforcement on the law, which often right now they're putting too much burden on those who have been attacked and those who have been victims of crime in ways that they don't do with other crimes. So those are 3 top priorities for me: guns, sexual assaults, and hate crimes. And for me, I would just note that all of this work is very personal. So it's not just the professional experience. And I think we should look at qualifications, who's done this work in the courtroom, who's got a track record of public service, but also, as I mentioned, quite personal as a neighbor, someone who is raising two kids right here and experiencing the same challenges that you are, and with specific common sense plans to address them, which are laid out on my website and which I've been talking about on the campaign trail. So I look forward to your questions and very happy to have a conversation and be in dialogue tonight.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your vision for Manhattan DA. I want to pick up on one of the major themes I think that we saw throughout your opening statement, which is kind of balancing public safety with fairness. And I want to just ask, during a time like now, where many people feel that public safety is deteriorating at a faster pace, and over the last 2 years, crime has certainly surged in New York. How do you really intend to balance, public safety with fairness?
Well, they go hand in hand for me, right? I mean, that's why I use those early examples, and that's just life giving, dividing exactly in two of three gun points of traditional and three involving the police, which for me is the primary fairness issue. They are inextricably linked. I've sat in rooms during investigations and try to encourage people to come forward who had information, who would not because of a lack of trust in law enforcement. So I've told my law enforcement partners, the person you stop today may be next week's witness and maybe next month's victim. So they really go hand in hand, how we treat people fairly. And I just plan to kind of do the kind of investigations I've done throughout my career. My theory of prosecution is if you follow the money and you follow the contraband, whether that be guns or drugs, they will take you to the most culpable people. You hold those people accountable, and you'll get enduring public safety benefits. And that's what I've done for the last 20 plus years. Great.
I want to talk about some local crime that many people have been concerned with, especially in our community, with a lot of local stores being, products are stolen from. Shoplifting seems to be on the rise with repeat offenders as well. So one of the questions that many members of our community were curious about was your particular plan and policy about not prosecuting kind of lower level petty thefts from shops, and what does that mean for shop owners, for employees, and for local residents?
Definitely. So I would just divide the shoplifting we're seeing into two categories, and I think the distinct, and we should talk about them separately. The first is we see enterprises developing of sort of grab and go organized enterprises, which are taking product off the shelf in a concerted manner. That to me is like any other criminal enterprise, one that is making lots of money and is organized for gain. I'm going to treat that the way I've treated matters, like I said, following the money and the contraband. And I think there's another category, which is one that is motivated by substance use disorder, mental health, or in some cases poverty. And I think we got to do those cases differently. We've been doing them. So the issues we see now are a product of a system where those folks are prosecuted. What happens is someone steals something, they go to Rikers for 3 months, and they come right back to the same store and steal again in another 3 months when they're released. We're not addressing the underlying issues of substance use disorder and mental health. And so I would beef up those diversion programs, support people so that we're not seeing this recurring cycle. And I would just hold up sort of, one example of a prosecution that, I certainly, I think is unfair. We have a reported case brought by the Manhattan DA's office from a few years ago, where a homeless person was prosecuted for using a counterfeit bill to buy food and toothpaste. He was prosecuted, and the district attorney's office recommended a sentence of 5 to 10 years. I want to use those resources on guns and sexual assault. I just don't think that's a case that I would bring. I don't think that advances public safety. 5 to 10 year sentence for trying to feed yourself, I don't think is appropriate.
And just as a follow-up, what would you suggest for somebody who steals products less than $250 from a local store? What's the plan for those individuals?
Yeah, the plan is to connect them to resources. If they fall into the latter category, not as a part of sort of an organized enterprise, and we have seen some of that, But folks who are stealing as a product of the other things I mentioned, we're going to connect them to resources, and I think that's going to provide more enduring, really stability for our communities. We see what happens under the current regime when people are being prosecuted for that. It hasn't caused the problem to abate, and I think in many ways during the pandemic, we've all seen the project ticks up. So I think this is a solution that really goes to the core issues that will change what you're seeing. What people are seeing now, I live, as I said, amongst you, right? So I'm going to the store and I want to change the status quo, which I think is not tenable.
Got it. Thank you. I want to pick up on gun violence, which you said is one of your major pieces of your platform. Gun violence is up in New York City. And I think everyone agrees that we should certainly, find the sources of where guns are getting, streamed into Manhattan from and prosecute those individuals. What about people who are in possession of illegal firearms? What's the plan with those individuals?
So I think we may all agree, but just on the first half, I think having someone with the know-how and the experience to do those cases is very important. They're not being done in a sufficient number now, and I think I just want to kind of lean into electing someone who knows how to do that. I think is essential to our long-term stability. Look, possession is important too. Like I told you, I came home 10 days ago. My entire scene was my entire block was a crime scene, and while, as I told you, I've had these experiences younger, having to navigate my block and literally be escorted by a police officer around a live gun and shells with my wife and teenage and preteen kids is terrible. And obviously you got to possess it to use it. So I've done possession cases. I've done possession cases as a prosecutor. What I've said, and just to take it on directly because it's been misconstrued by some, is that not every possession case is not the same. And so I'll give you two examples of possession cases that I've mentioned that people have said, oh, it's all for people carrying guns. The first is my father, who was I think probably above 65 at the time. He had a gun in our home, which he'd had growing up in the 80s, which I'd seen him display during what we thought was an attempted robbery. He had the gun for a long time, and when I became a lawyer, I said, Dad, look, you got to turn that thing in. And so I had him turn it in during essentially a gun buyback. Well, I don't think he got the buyback part. He just turned it in. And what I've said is that's a far better way of handling that, having the 65-year-old turn in the gun that hadn't been fired for 30 years, which he possessed only, as a matter of defense. So yeah, I think that kind of a criminal possession case is not something I don't think that advances public safety. The kind that do are the kinds that I have prosecuted, those who possessed weapons and have shown a propensity, or propensity is the wrong word, have actually used them or in situations where they might be used. That's a different matter.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And just to close off this section on gun violence, is it not the time to just have a blanket rule on possession with such high levels of gun violence?
No, I mean, I don't think we can have blanket rules that would ensnare the kind of case I just mentioned. I don't think that's something that would advance justice. And so no, I don't think that. I mean, look, I've worked in this space and lived and worked on these issues for 20 plus years. I think that stopping the flow is important. I think that the appropriate possession cases are important too. And I think that also, community interrupters who are working amongst us and de-escalating conflict. Often a lot of these events are in retaliation. And so having groups that are intervening, I think that's all important. But no, I wouldn't have a flat, every single, because you end up then diverting resources from, really, we know that, from the data that a high amount of these incidents are happening from a very small percentage of folks. So we should be focusing there.
Got it. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about cash bail and bail reform. So, bail reform law came into effect January 2020, and many detractors have said, it's increased crime, fewer criminals are in prison. But you've been a defendant of the bail reform bill. Could you just describe your relationship with the bail reform bill and where you see that going in the future?
Sure. So, I mean, I don't have a particular relationship in terms of, I wasn't in the legislature, but my relationship is one who's, been a criminal defense lawyer and argued bail, been a prosecutor, had people, held on bail. and as a family member who's posted bail. So I've really seen a 360 view of it. And I've also seen cases where really it's about wealth. Someone's being held in bail on $500 for something that, is not something I think any of us would view as a public safety matter. And more to the point, the person in the cell over, I've literally done this. I've posted bail for a loved one, and then someone else in the case was retained because they just didn't have someone who could post it for them. So I don't want a wealth test. And then as to the data, I'm a big believer in following the data, analyzing the data. And when you look at it, it's just that the thesis is not borne out. I'm like you. I don't want to be living amidst rising gun violence, but I also don't want to be coming up with solutions that are not rooted in the data. So on this, like we look at gun violence is up around the country, including in Republican and Democrat jurisdictions, including in the vast majority of those jurisdictions are ones that haven't changed bail. So I want to look and be rooted in the data, and I just, as you said, I'm just following the data and saying what the data reports, which is that there's no causal relationship as shown by the data. If the data shows that in a couple of years, then yeah, we should look at the data.
Got it. Thank you. I want to kind of connect bail reform a little bit to hate crimes. Going back a number of months, there was a famous case out of Brooklyn, which Eric Adams even just wrote about a little bit, in terms of a woman who attacked Jewish women number of times, and she was released a number of times until finally being held. So my question is, especially when it comes to hate crimes, which is really a pressing issue for our Jewish community, do you see any exceptions that should be made in terms of these crimes?
So, I've worked on hate crimes cases and been really engaged on, I think the number one issue on hate crimes is that the law is being incorrectly described. And so the NYPD spokesperson, said, hey, we need proof of animus at the scene before we investigate something as a hate crime. That's just flat out not the law. So I think the primary issue on hate crimes is, making sure that the law is being applied. We don't need basically the common sense, the circumstances that suggest something is a hate crime is what should prevail in the courtroom. That's what the law is. I don't recall the specific instance you're talking about, but I think hate crimes are different than other types of crimes. I mean, if you look at the legislative preamble for the hate crimes statute, it talks about hate crimes tearing at the fabric of society and being, basically inconsistent with, our governing documents. I firmly believe that, and that's why I've sort of leaned in. But I think the main issue on enforcement is that right now there's so many things that aren't being investigated as hate crimes that should be, because it's being foreclosed at the scene, and a burden is being put on whoever's attacked to sort of prove that their attacker had a particular motive. That's the police's job. That's the DA's job. I plan to increase the size of the hate crimes unit. Right now, it's about 5 people. I plan to more directly engage. I know the sitting district attorney recently said he would have a hate crime hotline so people could direct. I think that's a good idea, but kind of one that's long overdue. So that's what I would do on hate crimes: investigate them more rigorously, not foreclose, but actually investigate things. And if I can maybe just give one investigatory example, if you have something that's an indicia, you don't maybe say a word, but you're in a neighborhood or you do an attack on a Saturday, when people are walking back from temple, but you don't say anything. Right now, the NYPD is saying, well, not so sure that's a hate crime. And they're not going the next step. Well, okay. Did you cut a grand jury subpoena and look at the person's social media and all of their emails? I mean, they have so many ways to get inside of a person's brain now, even if they don't say something at the scene, but they're ruling things out where there's no express animus stated at the scene. And that to me is the main failing right now on hate crime investigations.
Got it. And I guess kind of tying back to what I alluded to a little earlier, I think many are concerned that, after a hate crime is perpetrated, once it's identified as a hate crime, that, such an individual may be arrested, but then essentially released back to the community through the new law that was passed in 2020. So I guess, how should we as Jews, as a minority that's often targeted with hate crimes, how should we kind of understand our place in the city when we feel, in many ways disenfranchised, when we don't have a say in essentially feeling safe in our own communities?
Well, I mean, I think investigating them it matters as hate crimes is the starting point for cases that I think you're talking about. Sort of someone is charged as an assault. I think in that one probably not a hate crime if I'm remembering the reporting. So I think the first thing is to charge it as a hate crime, which as for those who don't know, when you charge someone as a hate crime, what it does is increase the penalty by a grade, which has all sorts of other legal implications. Would have to look at the statute to see if it affects bail. But as you know, the law has changed a couple of times. But I think hate crimes are more serious and need to be treated as such. And so I would charge them, which would enhance the penalties, which I know some people disagree with. But for me, I've been clear about that hate crimes I think are important, need to be investigated rigorously and charged with the sentencing enhancement and all the legal ramifications that flow from it.
Got it. A bit of a lighter question in terms of weight, perhaps, but if you win this election, you'll be the first Black district attorney in Manhattan. What does that mean to you?
So, I can answer it symbolically and substantively. First, I'd note not only the first Black DA, but if you want to be a really light note, the first DA, elected DA in 75 years who's not a child of a cabinet secretary. So bringing diversity in that way as well. Look, symbolically for me, at the beginning of the pandemic, my 11-year-old son told me he didn't want to wear a face mask because he knows the science and knows COVID, but said, "Dad, I don't want to wear a face mask because I don't want the police to think I'm a robber and shoot me," which is, internalized trauma. And so, with him on primary night, kind of by my side, I saw sort of his joy and sort of his pride in knowing that his father would be the person, responsible for fairness and safety. And I think that's not just him; that's the Little League kids I coach. That's the kids who are in my Sunday school class. And so that's the symbolism. I would say that some of the experiences I've had, which are not unique to being Black, but I've certainly had them growing up as a Black kid in Harlem, are what I really point to. So I think I haven't scoured the historical record, but I'm thinking I'm likely to be the first district attorney who's ever had a homicide victim on his doorstep, ever had a semi-automatic weapon put to his head, ever had someone who's returned from incarceration, live on his couch for a year, ever had to walk through a crime scene with a live gun and bullets to walk in his house with his kids. And I think all of those things make me attuned to the particular fairness and public safety challenges that have guided me throughout my career, and they would guide me as district attorney.
Great. I think I'll close with one final question before your closing remarks. As people of faith, what do you think communities of faith can do in helping curb crime in New York City? And what can we as a people of faith do to essentially help our neighbors in times of need with this increased crime?
So I view all of this through a lens of faith. As I just mentioned a moment ago in passing, I teach the Sunday school class at my church. I've been doing that for the past, I haven't lost track, more than 15, because before my daughter was born, I was the head of my youth council there. So I see all these issues, through a prism of, kind of doing justice, loving mercy, and walking humbly before God. And I think that particularly in a place like Manhattan, where people do not focus on house of worship, particularly, if you got friends from other parts of the country who the first thing that pops to mind about Manhattan is not our faith, but, having walked these streets and, having been to synagogues and churches throughout the island, I think they're the backbone of the island. I was with a number of clergy a couple of weeks ago, calling for more resources for some of the programs I talk about, mental health and substance use, saying that's people when they come home, it's the first place they turn to, and then sort of fellowships and networks in terms of our public safety. I've participated in sort of take back the block days and nights and walk, and a lot of times those are led by people of faith, organized by a house of faith. So essential part of how I want to govern as district attorney. Some people have, their own citizens council when they're in office. I don't want to supplant. I want to meet folks where they are. And I think we have a thriving, really network of civic groups, yes, but also houses of faith, worship groups, worship leaders. And they, to me, are a part of the connective tissue that will stand up in the name of faith for both fairness and public safety. And I want to compliment the work they're doing. And that's my plan as DA.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those uplifting words about the role of faith communities in Manhattan. I'll now give you a few minutes for some closing remarks to share with us once again your vision for Manhattan DA.
Yeah, I think your questions were so probing and both broad and deep that we've covered a lot of ground. And so I would just sort of really end on a personal note. I'm about to say 47. I'll be 48, on Thursday. Save for some years in Cambridge, in college and law school, and a wayward year in DC. I've been on this island and working to improve both public safety and fairness. And I mentioned the professional things that I've done, but I sort of glossed over some of the personal things, but I think they go hand in hand and they speak to your question about not just sort of our faith networks, but our civic ones. So, I was, walking through the park the other day with my wife. This was actually, I guess it was right before the primary. And I heard footsteps behind me, and as many Manhattanites, you can kind of say, what's that? But it was pitter patter. And it turned out to be a boy who had been on my Little League team a couple of years ago. And he was proudly chasing me down to say that he'd seen me on TV or following the campaign. And for me, particularly as I speak with you, organized, as you said, your question about the role of faith, it's that moment. It's the hour every week I spend in my church, teaching our high school class. Like, that's what this is about. I mean, I can sit and tell you about the gun work I've done. I've done that. I can tell you about the cases I've done. I can tell you about suing the Trump Foundation. I can tell you about the public corruption work that I've done, prosecuting 2 mayors and the former majority senator leader. But at the end of the day, it's about those human moments and Lily being here, walking these streets. I mentioned the shooting, but equally as important as the shooting on my block was 2 nights later when we joined with NYPD and neighbors and stood on the corner and talked about, this is our neighborhood. And so I've done that particularly with a focus on House of the Faith and on youth activities, because I think that's how we get fundamental change. Using the levers of power in government, the vision I've articulated on guns, sexual assaults, and hate crimes, but partnering with the power of our communities, not just to enforce the law, not just to divert cases to services, but to connect with the humans behind those cases and bring fundamental, lasting safety and reform to a system that's desperately in need of both. So I thank you for your time. I thank you for your focus on these issues. And I look forward to being in dialogue and partnership, hopefully for months and years to come.
Thank you, Mr. Bragg. We really appreciate you joining us this evening. I also want to thank Mr. Kniff for joining us earlier tonight. I hope tonight was informative, and I want to thank our audience and our co-sponsors once again, B'nai Jeshurun, Chabad of the West Side, Congregation Shereth Israel, Manhattan Jewish Experience, Lincoln Square Synagogue, Ohab Tzedek, and the West Side Institutional Synagogue for joining us tonight. Thank you all, and please remember to vote on Election Day 2 weeks from tomorrow on Tuesday, November 2nd. Have a good night.